Hello guys, Shadow King here, and today we're bringing you part one of What If, or part one of my second chance at life, but isn't this back too far ophis. So, some of you guys who actually have been on my Wattpad have noticed that this is a new story that has been going on. Now, one thing I want to mention, this is technically the whole redo of What If Issei had the Holy Sword Excalibur, because I felt like this would have been much more interesting to do instead of just saying like, oh, Issei just randomly has Excalibur because Merlin is still here. No. So what ends up happening was a bit of a spoiler for those who haven't read the light novel. But what ended up happening in the light novel was that Issei got struck, I think it was in the back, by an arrow that was coated in Samael's poison, which is like incredibly toxic, or not toxic. Well, technically it is, but it's incredibly deadly to dragons. So, since in this case there was much more poison in this timeline, it actually ends up killing Issei before they actually manage to get a portal back to bring him back. So Issei, like while on his deathbed, would, or not really deathbed, would just kind of be talking with Drake, and him kind of talking with Drake about his regrets on what he would have done differently if he wasn't a pervert. I mean, sure, it's pretty much impossible at this point to change his personality, but still, one could be a dreamer. In any case, right when Issei like passes on, ophis would come in and like look over Issei's dead body and sees that his soul is like would be like moving on into, I guess, hell, because he's technically a devil. So hold on. Okay. So ophis would actually use a magic circle to like stop his soul from going to hell, as she, well, technically, okay, she just says, because at this point it's just easier to say she, you will not die here, Issei. I don't know why I'm doing this, but for some reason it feels like my soul is telling me to not let him die. So ophis originally planned to send Issei back to the beginning of his life, as a around the time that Irina actually left to go to England. But she sort of sneezed, and let's just say that kind of disrupted the spell because of her concentration was ruined, and ended up sending Issei back in time way off than ophis intended. So we cut in into like around 9 months, where Issei is sort of reborn in the past, as Issei would slowly wake up, kind of not really feeling any movement, or kind of not really feeling his body, as he tries to get up or at least move, but notices that it's incredibly difficult, as he kind of like brings up one hand to his eyes, as he just sees like a very small hand, like a newborn baby's hand, in front of him, as he's all like, "What's going on? Am I a baby? Drake, do you know what's going on?" As when he says Drake, he gets no response. As Issei's kind of freaking out a bit, saying, Drake, 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 are you there? Please don't be messing with me, Drake. Come on, Drake. As this was going on for a few minutes, until Issei finally notices that Drake isn't really with him at this point. So Issei kind of starts to cry a little bit, because Drake is actually one of his best friends. As he kind of starts crying on the outside as well, like a baby's cry. As then a woman would walk in, wearing more like I guess it's sort of like a maid, not a maid outfit. It's more like those. I think it's kind of like a nun, not a nun, like it's hard to describe, but basically, hold on. It's a sorry. As Issei would look over, see and sees that like a woman looking over him as she goes, "Oh, are you finally awake, Virgil?" As Issei is all like, "Virgil, is that my name? Wait, please don't tell me I got isekai or something like that." As he kind of starts freaking out a bit, as as everyone would just kind of pick him up and say, "Are you hungry, little Virgil?" As Issei's like stomach would kind of rumble, as he kind of gets a little bit embarrassed, saying, "In all honesty, yes, I am." So the woman would take Issei over to like the dining hall or the eating room or the dinery or whatever it's called. As Issei would just kind of see like a bunch of kids like getting up to eat and eat breakfast. As the woman would actually prepare like a milk bottle or something to feed Virgil. And while I do know, yes, this is technically the Promised Neverland, it isn't really the Promised Neverland. They just kind of have the only real similarities are it's actually Isabella, and the kids are not really the same. So yeah, no Promised Neverland like with demons and all that. I just like using the Promised Neverland because I actually like Isabella because I think it was either the light novel or a fan fiction where it said that Isabella actually put the kids off to sleep before they were killed and shipped off to be demon food so they can live their final moments in happiness. So yeah, even though I don't really agree with Isabella's methods, it still was a nice way to say that Isabella actually cared for the children instead of just you know, being as cold hearted as she appears to be in the anime. So so Issei would just kind of be looking around, seeing like a bunch of kids saying, "Have I been reincarnated or into like a fantasy isekai where the main character is like was abandoned at birth or some shit?" Not really an uncommon one to do, but still, it's surprising nonetheless. So next thing you know, the kids say, "Thank you for the food." As they begin eating, as Isabella would be feeding Issei a bottle of milk or whatever they did in the early 500s, where babies were actually abandoned at birth. I don't really know. So after all that's done, Issei would be sent back to the crib or whatever is early 500s equivalent to a crib, as he just off into a sleep, as he sees that he's walking around in like it's sort of an area where everything kind of looks like to be like dark, as he kind of sees weird lines moving all across the floor, but like they're not lit up, or they look like they should be lit up, but they're not. So what Issei does is just continue walking forward and looking around until he gets blinded by a bright red light in the center. As Issei's eyes widen, as he kind of like keeps moving forward, as he's all like, "Is the reason why I couldn't access Drake is because I'm not strong enough." So he keeps running forward, thinking that Drake is just sort of like inactive because he's not strong enough and a kid again. So he runs towards it as he kind of touches a ball of light to try to activate Drake. But all what happens is that like the light begins glowing more intensely And then suddenly it just begins glowing like a reactor core that you see in anime. Not really a real life one, but more like a reactor core. And then suddenly the lines that go all over through the system or on the ground start to lit up as 1, 2, 3, 10, 20, 40, 60, 80, 90, 100, 150, 200, 300 lines all start glowing intense with a bright light as Issei's are like, what the fuck? As for all of those who are a fan of Fate, you guys do know what I'm talking about. So, so for now, how to say this? For now, okay, screw it. The next 4 years go by. Issei has been training by himself in an open field, not really interacting with much children his age. As Issei would just be practicing the basics of hand-to-hand combat and not really that much of a magic because he barely even knows how to use magic because he kind of sucks at it. So he will be more practicing on concentrating his magical energy into his belly and then breathing out like fire because he did still keep some dragon genetics. Hold on. Sorry about that. So Issei would be practicing his fire breath as well. Like I said, dragon genetics because he did give up his arm to Drake. So his soul does have the whole dragon genetics, but weirdly enough, he doesn't keep any of the double traits. He does wonder about that. But little does he know, it's not because of Drake's replacing his normal human arm to a dragon one, it's because of something else. So, as Issei would cut off his training for a bit, or stop his training for a bit, as he's like looks at himself and he kind of lifts up his shirt, seeing that he kind of has a 4-pack, working a little bit up to a 6-pack, as he would say, even though I'm a 4-year-old, I still am ridiculously strong. And he kind of thinks to himself, and luckily, um, I do know how to cook, or at least get the required spices to cook, so nothing here tastes bland as hell. Seriously. Like, no, or honestly, people in the 500s, early 500s, didn't really know how to use spices. Oh well, innovation at its finest. So, as Isa would just kind of be walking home, you would kind of feel like a sharp ping on his like lower back, and I think on the top of his head. And then suddenly, um, and then suddenly, he kind of feels like a thump sound on top of his head. As he kind of touches it, as he's all like, "Wait, what's this?" As he looks behind him, as he sees like a tail, as he's all like, "What's this?" Grabs it and accidentally yanks it too hard. As he kind of does a whole shriek, like a cat shriek. As he kind of gets embarrassed, as he's all like, "What the hell was that?" As Issei would run off to a nearby lake, as he looks at himself, seeing that he has cat ears and a cat tail. As he's all like, "Oh god damn it, I'm a neko show. Konoko is going to murder me." As he's sort of freaking out, he sort of thinks to himself, "How do I hide this again?" As he kind of fears what will happen when he goes back to the orphanage. It would look the and would see the look on disbelief of his caretakers and the other children. So he tries hard to like retract it. It kind of doesn't seem to work until like finally after half an hour trying, he finally gets it. As he like breathes a sigh of relief and runs back to the orphanage before they notice he's been missing for too long. So instead we go back to the orphanage, take up one of the rooms and just kind of, or not really take up one of the rooms. Well, yeah, take on one of the rooms and hops on his bed as he begins pondering what the hell this means as why he's a neko show. So he kind of begins theorizing that it might be his parents of this timeline because he did figure out that he's in a fucking past as as he kind of begins theorizing like multiple reasons why they had to abandon him and all that. So one of the theories that he came up with was that something happened similar to what happened to Akino's mom, that maybe his parents were being chased by like clan members or something like that because of his father. So he begins pondering over and over as he finally comes to the conclusion, I will get nowhere with this. I might as well ask Isabella if she knows anything. And this is going to be living it off, guys. Shadow King out. See you guys in the next part.